What's going on, guys? Zain here with Everything Vive. I want to welcome you back for another episode. As usual, I am joined by Ronnie. Ronnie, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. You know, we're going to have you introduce one of the episodes sometime, just to shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, I'll probably just sound like a wannabe Zain or something, because I know your kind of spiel, like how you start out and everything, and I can't really imagine the podcast starting out any other way. So
I feel like it's getting kind of stale now.
You know, I'll spend some time. I'll talk to myself on the way to work and everything. Try to get my banter levels up, and then one of these days we'll just all right.
All right, fair enough.
Give it over to me.
We'll try something new. We'll do it when we can. The next time we record in person, maybe.
All right, sounds good.
All right, so welcome back, everyone. Oh, excuse me. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you've had a fantastic week. Ronnie and I are ready to dive into some VR news. And actually, Ronnie, I know we spoke earlier, but there wasn't much that changed from last week and this week. So there's just one main topic that I wanted to bring up today, and I thought just it's relevant to VR as a whole, I think, and I think the implications for it affect the Vive greatly, although it's not Vive related. But everybody's talking about this Oculus price cut, the price cut number 2 that brings the Rift and Touch, so the full package, down to $400. And which is essentially half the price of the Vive, and some people were even talking about how the Prime Day deal was even better, because I think on Amazon Prime Day you could get $100 off of the Vive, which would make it $700. But then they did the price cut for the Oculus down to $400, and then you get an Amazon gift card for $100 if you buy it. So that essentially cuts the price down to $300.
Wow!
And that's the price of some consoles out there. I mean, maybe even cheaper than some consoles.
And just to be clear, I mean, my understanding is it's going to go back up to 500 as kind of like a final. Like it was down to 400 for a certain time period. And I think it still is 400, but eventually it's going to kind of settle at 500. Is my understanding.
I did hear that it was a limited time offer. I didn't hear a specific number that was going to go back up to.
Yeah, so it's limited. It's a limited time offer for 400, but regardless, the permanent pricing right now, even without the deals and whatnot, is going to be. It has been lowered to 500. So if you act now without the Prime deal, without anything, just go and purchase it. It should be 400 for the headset and the Touch.
The Prime Day deal is over now, but I was just saying, at some people were able to get it for 300, which I think is an absolute steal. So here, this is a question that I want to pose to you, mainly because between you and I, at least on this podcast, you are the expert, I am the enthusiast. So you've been following this for a while. You've been following VR. You know, you like Oculus, you like the Vive. I mean, you've been tracking this since 2012 or so? I think in our initial conversation. So, you know, what does this mean to you? Obviously, like I said, this is a Vive-centric podcast, but the fact that it's half the price of the Vive right now is gonna shake things up in the VR landscape, I think, dramatically. And some people aren't too worried about it. Some people are saying that Vive will need to cut its price in order to stay competitive. I mean, what are your initial thoughts? I have some, but I'm curious, now that we actually have a chance to talk, what are your thoughts on all this? Because there's a lot of chatter happening around, and I trust your opinion, so I'm curious as to what you think.
Okay, well, it's kind of interesting because, I mean, now I'm trying to think back to, it's funny that you mentioned that I've been following this since 2012 or whatever, since, the early days of the Oculus, the initial Oculus development kit and all that stuff, because to some degree, I never thought that these headsets would come out as expensive as they did. So it's kind of fascinating to think of it from that perspective. To some extent, I kind of think that it might be too little too late, as far as Oculus cutting its price. And the reason I say that is not because it's not a great price, and not because it's, it's certainly beneficial for them to be that much lower than the Vive is. But at the same time, I mean, if you look at who's had the most momentum, granted, I think the VR industry as a whole was kind of losing a little bit of momentum here the last couple months, as far as I can tell. But that said, if you were to look to anyone as losing the most momentum, that would have been Oculus, because really the Vive kind of has really in the last few months started to really stand out as the leader in the PC front, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, most people, whereas maybe early on when they were both released, the Vive looked like the technological leader, like it was the most advanced headset. But most people would say the branding of the Oculus and just the overall excitement around the Oculus was, possibly had its prospects a little bit more, looking a little bit more rosy than that of the Vive. I feel like the last few months has been the opposite, where every news story coming out on the Oculus has just been negative, and more people have been kind of moving over to the Vive that are really into this stuff, if they hadn't already, purchased the Vive previously. So in a sense, I feel like the price cut here, it's interesting, but I wonder how much it's actually going to move the units, because a lot of people that already had a lot of excitement for VR at this point have already purchased their initial headsets. In my opinion, there's a limited number of people that have powerful PCs and are interested enough in this stuff to really be mindful of whether or not, the headsets out there are going for certain prices. Like I had a lot of people asking me about VR headsets, 6, 7, 8 months ago. And I feel like a lot of those people that were really excited about it have found ways to get headsets by now. And yeah, so I'd be curious as to who has held out because it was so expensive, and they've held out to this point. I'm curious how many of those people are now looking at it and saying, "Oh, $400 is cheap enough for me to kind of jump on board this late into this cycle," because $400 is still not that cheap. Like, it is cheap compared to what we've gotten used to, but it's still fairly expensive. And so I'm just wondering, how much that's going to move units or not. I guess only time will tell. But getting back to what you had said about my real thoughts is, it would have been so nice for these systems to come out at $400 to begin with.
Oh my gosh, that would have been fantastic.
Yeah,
it's a little bit.
Because I think when all the new hardware was first being announced, that's when there was the most excitement around it. And when the initial price points were revealed, I think unless you were a super hardcore, part of the reason I wasn't fazed as much by the pricing was because I had tried the initial dev kits, and I had been in, I knew about it, and I knew that I had to try this thing, and I knew that I needed these new experiences. But a lot of people out there don't know that. They haven't really tried the headsets, or by now, if you haven't tried a headset, I think it's probably because you're not a diehard, you're not interested. Because if you really wanted to find a way to try them out, you could have gone to Best Buy by now. You could have went to, I don't know if they had PlayStation VR kiosks at like GameStop or anything like that. But like by now, there have been ways to kind of, if you really wanted to, try a headset for yourself. And so at that point, you're either sold and you're just waiting for the prices to drop, and maybe that's who is going to potentially pick something like this up, or you're going to wait for the next headsets, I think. So
yeah.
So it's just interesting. Like I'm just curious how many people out there that are going to be in that cross section of I have a powerful PC, because let's say you don't have a powerful PC, then I still don't think $100 price cut or $200 price cut is enough to get those people moving, because you still, like, if you didn't have a computer that could run VR.
Yeah, there definitely is that added
expensive
cost in there, but people act irrationally, man. Like, there's if they see a price cut, like when they're looking at it, 600 to 400 is what, like a 30% price cut, and like nobody's factoring in the computer because I think in their minds they already need to get the computer. So therefore that's like a sunk or a fixed cost. Like, the variable cost is how much this is going to be. And to your point, I do agree that the early adopters are going to pay whatever price, obviously. But what I'm wondering is, how many of that, maybe not mainstream, but that second wave, because I have a lot of friends who, had tried it and were like, I really want it, but I'm kind of going to, do what I can to wait until Gen 2. Now I got to follow up with them to see if anybody actually picked up the Oculus on Prime Day or, while it was dropped, but, or the price was dropped, but,
here's the other thing for the average person, like this just made me think of it. For the average person, if they were browsing Amazon during Prime Day and they saw the Oculus had dropped that much, I'm wondering how much if the average person would realize how much of a value they're getting for that $300 or whatever it would have been to get the Rift and the Touch when compared to, let's say, like a Galaxy VR, like a Gear VR, I should say. Man, it's been a while since we've talked about the mobile stuff, but there's a lot of those cheap kind of, lower level mobile headsets out there that you can stick your phones in and all those kinds of headsets. And you see those when I walk into a Best Buy or a different, like you see kiosks for the Google Pixel phone that, can function with VR. And I'm just wondering, for your average person, if they understand the difference between those two things, and if they would really see the price drop in the Rift and say, oh man, and actually realize that that's a significant price drop on a version of VR that's much better quality than any of those other options.
I'd say anybody who bought the Oculus on that on Prime Day, or even just with the price drop to $400, I would make a bet that they didn't just stumble onto the deal. There's probably people who have been following this stuff, waiting for Prime Day, waiting for announcements like this. Just like you and I, where it's just like, they didn't have the capital at the time, but how many people listen on this podcast? How many people are on the Vive and I'm sure the Oculus subreddit that don't have a unit themselves, but are fascinated by this and are waiting for their opportunity to jump in. And when, something like that happens where it's really kind of a 50% price drop, more than 50% price drop from, however many months ago when they were both priced at 800.
It's kind of crazy.
It's, I'm sure there's a lot of people who just hit that emotional trigger and are like, you know what, this is as good as it's going to get. I want to get it now. I don't want to wait for Gen 2. I need it.
And I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, as an owner of an Oculus Rift, I'm kind of shocked as to how much it's come down so quickly because, man, have I played it enough?
Should have waited, man.
Justify the extra $300 or $400 at this point. So
and I felt like somebody really explained it well when So now let's do a direct comparison between Oculus at 400 and the Vive at 800. Yeah, no one's going to argue that when it comes to hardware, when it comes to tracking and all that. I still think that the Vive is winner, especially for room scale. If you're looking for the ultimate, VR experience, it's still the Vive. But is it worth twice the price? Is it worth $400 extra? If you just want to get into VR, how many people who may have been, I hate to say this, but I'm not trying to call anyone out, but it's just like if they may have been Team Vive, but it's like, hey, you know what? I want to get into VR no matter what, and I got to jump on this Oculus deal where I can get it for $300 with that gift card.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, looking at kind of what's ahead and how, I mean, there's all kinds of things. Who knows what Oculus is going to look like in a year from now. But that said, if you look to announcements that are being made for software in the Oculus store, I mean, just recently, Disney and Marvel made the announcement that they're working on a superheroes title that's going to be at least temporarily Oculus exclusive. It seems to me like it's just going to be an Oculus exclusive, period. So for Vive owners, they'll probably have to use Revive or some other way, of running it. But I mean, if Oculus continues to make those kind of good deals, and who knows with Disney what those kind of deals might be like. If they have Marvel, maybe they have Star Wars, maybe they have some other. I really don't know, but I mean, if they continue to show, to push their software like that, then if I'm looking at what games are going to be coming out and I'm excited about those brands, that's another reason to jump on board. So now you have a significantly cheaper headset and you have buzz around new titles. I mean, granted, a Marvel VR game isn't quite the same as like a Fallout 4 VR or a Doom VR, but it's still pretty significant. I mean, Oculus does a great job of getting developers on board in their store. So I don't know.
Wait, will Fallout 4, is that only for Vive?
Yeah, it's only for Vive.
I did not know that until right now. No,
yeah,
I mean, that's you're
it's
totally
a Bethesda game, so
okay. Well, you're
like,
totally right about the Marvel thing. I'll be honest, it was a little disheartening to read that article or just to read the announcement about it.
And the guys that are making it, yeah, and the only reason I mean, full disclosure, besides reading announcements and kind of seeing people's impressions of the early demos of that game. I mean, I don't know the exact details on the exclusivity, if it's permanent or whatnot, but it does look like, I mean, the developers behind it, I think, were the same developers that made Ripcoil and a couple of other. My understanding, it's pretty much like an Oculus developer.
Gotcha.
So I would think, like in that scenario, probably the odds of it staying Oculus only are pretty high if that's the team working on it. But I could be wrong. But
well, my broader point was that it's as a Vive owner, it's disheartening to see something like that. I mean, I hope it's not an exclusive title indefinitely. But only time will tell. So I'm not gonna get too worried about it now. But I guess is a little bit. Sorry, go ahead.
Just to throw this in, like it's possible Revive titles will work better on the Vive going forward if the
that's true.
If the Knuckle controller comes out, that stuff might map more 1-to-1, and then none of this could be that big of a factor for us. Who knows? But.
And I'll get to that in a second. But the point that I was making earlier was that, like, if Facebook and Oculus already have that relationship with Disney, that they can do something like this with Marvel. I mean, Marvel right now is like one of the hottest things. They're making billions of dollars with their movies. If they secure some type of exclusive thing for Star Wars, I mean, there's millions of Star Wars fans out there that I feel like wouldn't necessarily jump ship, but if they're undecided, would definitely go Oculus just for that title alone. And then the fact that it's cheaper makes the decision so much easier. It's like, okay, well, I'm still getting VR. I'm not getting the premium experience, but I love Star Wars, so therefore, like, that's gonna sell it for me.
Yep. And I mean, Oculus has recently, they've talked about releasing a new kind of standalone headset that's
I did see that
in the middle of a high end and a low end.
It's going to be $200 out next year, which I'm really curious what that will offer. This next gen stuff that's coming out, with the inside out tracking.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying. I mean, Vive is working on something similar with Google, right?
Yep.
A lot of people are really talking about because that gets around some of the issues I was mentioning earlier about people having to have strong PCs. It makes it a harder impulse buy, I think, when you have to have so much gear, already in order to get it to run. If you could, even if it was higher than 200, if it was 300.
200 is cheaper than most consoles. I mean, it is cheaper than most consoles.
200 is dirt cheap.
And that was $300. That's the baseline price because you don't need a computer.
Yeah. But even if it was more money than that, if you told me if you told me it was $400, but it was an all-in-one unit that had a comparable experience to what we've been experiencing on the PC side for the last year or two, that would be amazing. And I think a lot of people would jump on that, right? So for $200, if it's anything remotely, decent as far as a VR experience, that could be the breaking point. Like that, if it's marketed well, if people understand that this is different than products that have been out there previously, because it is self-contained, it doesn't require it basically, hey, you're going to get the high-end VR for the low-end pricing, and it's all in one. It's easy to set up. Like, anyone can do it. Like, you literally purchase it, throw it on your head, and you're immediately playing games like that have inside-out tracking, like you had said, and all that. Like, if that happens and it's marketed and messaged well, that could be the thing that finally gets things ramped up at an exponential rate from where we are now.
I think even if it can do like 75 to 80% of what the high-end headsets can do for a fraction of the price, that's what I think will hit the mainstream. And I think that might be why, there's so much focus on it now. And, we can dig into this even further, because it's like we're sitting around here waiting for a wireless solution when the real answer might not be a wireless solution for these high-end headsets. It's making these standalone ones, focusing your time and energy on the standalone ones to make them just as good as the high end. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Whether it's inside out tracking, whatever other types of technology, it's not really the wireless that's needed. It's more so, I'm not the techie guy here, so I don't want to throw out random terms, but if you're going to focus your resources somewhere, it might be on making that, $200 item or that $200 product, almost just as good, or 80-90% as good as what you can have for, the premium headsets with a full computer backing it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, the rate at which technology is improving now, it's not out of the question that 2 to 3 years after one product comes out that you're able to get the same, experience or a similar experience with dedicated hardware at a much cheaper price. So, I mean, just look at how phones progress. The phones that we have now are more powerful than consoles from the last generation, I'd say. So, at least in a lot of respects. So,
that's true.
It's interesting. So, only time will tell. But I mean, it's definitely. I mean, to get back to, I'd say that a lot of what's going to happen from this price drop, I think, are kind of unknowns at this point. But what we can take from this is that, lowering the price of virtual reality in general is a positive thing. And I think that we're getting closer to the price points that can really make a dent in the mainstream if they're taken advantage of properly. And so I think that's the biggest factor here. I mean, if there's one thing missing from some of these price drops, it's the marketing that also needs to be pushed alongside. So I'd be interested to see what Oculus, or how Oculus combines the price drop in the next several weeks with a marketing push for titles like the upcoming Marvel titles and other exclusives. If they do a good job of linking both of those things together and really make a new push, then I think it really could get momentum swinging back in their favor. If not, if they just kind of if they announce the price drop and then it's same old, like I'd be curious to see how much of an impact it has until the next gen stuff. But
yeah, I mean, well, Oculus, I feel like their marketing game has always been on point. I think you and I have been a little bit more critical of HTC and people not realizing that this type of room scale VR exists. When they think of VR, they just think of VR. So, whatever the case might be, you mentioned something earlier, and we can just kind of close with these couple points here, where if we have Revive, if we have the knuckle controllers, then everything will be okay. Well, yeah, I mean, for us as the end user, I mean, I'm not worried about where VR is going because I'm not tied to any specific ship. But, I do have this affinity for HTC, and I think in that situation, HTC would be the one that suffers because, Valve is still going to get their cut. They're still going to get, if these knuckle controllers work well. Facebook or Oculus Home is going to get their cut because people will be buying these games on Oculus's, their closed off system. So it's I'm just curious what HTC is going to do to stay relevant. They have Viveport, which I feel like Viveport is getting better. I feel like Viveport is in that awkward phase right now where they're still amassing this collection of titles.
I have been surprised, though. Some of the titles I've seen show up there have been like relatively recent titles.
Yeah.
Like high profile. Like it seems like they're doing a good job of getting good stuff.
So hopefully that clout and that collection or catalog is the word I was looking for. It will continue to grow because I think that can be a big business boom for them, or at least a win for them. So yeah.
No, I agree.
But yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see how this goes. I don't want to be too much of a Debbie Downer. I know we were talking about a lot of awesome Oculus things that were happening, but I think you brought up, just to close out, I think you brought up a fantastic point that HTC is working with Google on that standalone headset as well, and we don't have any details for it. I hope that it's going to be roughly around the same price range, and maybe this is Oculus's response to that. Because Google's put out some fantastic software, and if you team them up with HTC, I'm excited for what they can bring. So we'll see what Gen 2 looks like, or Gen 1.5, whatever that ends up officially being.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
All right, cool, man. Well, let's go ahead and transition over to Game Talk then. I think you and I actually have some pretty relevant titles that we can discuss, or at least something, stuff that's a little bit newer. I don't know, you want to go first or second?
Yeah, I can go first. The game I wanted to do this week is called Gorn. So that's kind of like born with a G. I'm sure that's what they're going for, because when I get a chance to explain kind of what the game's about, you'll kind of see what I mean. But essentially, I mean, this game, it's a $20 game. It is essentially like a cartoony combat type game where you are a gladiator that goes into a ring and just decimates your competitors. So you step into a little arena, and there's kind of, there's all these funny looking spectator heads in the crowd, and they say, basically you're signaled to salute to start the match. And then a gate comes down, and like a gladiator, goofy little animated guy comes out and tries to kill you. And it's you versus him or them, or as it gets more and more involved, as you get further in the game, it's wave based, but it's such a funny game, and it's just hard to explain what's so unique about it. But it's the aesthetic, because it's cartoony, like I mentioned, but it's also just kind of silly, overly done. And I think that I don't know why I'm having such a hard time kind of putting into words what makes this game so unique, but I think a lot of it has to do with the interactions and how the physics work in the game. Because like I said, it's basically it's not a game for those that are squeamish of gore and blood and guts, because it's very, very violent. And even
graphic,
though it's even though it's a cartoony game, when you start out the level, very early on you just have your fists, but then eventually you get maces and various blunt objects and whatnot. And when you hit the enemies that are coming at you, everything that you do has an impact on that person, whether it be just scarring up their face, or their eyeballs start hanging out, blood squirting everywhere. You can pull their heads off and their legs and arms and beat them with them, and you can if you hit,
it reminds me of your description of Robo Recall, actually.
Yeah, except now it's with squirting blood and everything. So that's kind of it does remind me of some of that to an extent, but it's really fun, and they did a really, really good job of making the impacts feel satisfying. And that's really, I mean, more so than any other game that I've played so far, I feel like they get the physics right to where if you hit them lightly, if you hit them too lightly, it doesn't really do anything. If you hit them with a certain amount of speed or force, it'll damage them. But if you hit them really hard and hit them hard enough times, you literally can like make their head explode. And it's like, and it just feels right. Like it feels like when you're putting more oomph into your hits, that actually connects and adds to what you're doing. And so it's just everything about it. And like I said, some of that is getting the feel right. Some of it is just the way the models, the way the physics work, because everything in the game kind of has this kind of squishy, like rubbery feel to it in a sense.
Yeah.
Like all the weapons you get, even though like you're holding a mace, let's say, the top of the mace kind of has like a stretchy, kind of rubbery look to it. Like when you're hitting really hard, yeah, it hits, but it's also like kind of gives as it's hitting. And like all the soft bodies, these gladiators that you're fighting against, like they don't move quite like normal humans. They kind of have like an almost Stretch Armstrong, like rubbery kind of funny like movement to them. And that translates not only to your movement, but it translates to when you're fighting them. Like the bodies react to what you're doing, like in an overblown fashion compared to what would be realistic. And so all of that stuff just feels right, and it's just a lot of fun. And the more you play it, it's very simple in that, it's just, like I said, you step into an arena, you kill a guy, and then it's over. And then you have to start the game back up again, and then now there's maybe two guys, or you kill one guy and then another guy comes out of a gate. And maybe the next guy has some armor, and you have to hit the armor off before you can actually do the damage. And eventually there will be 3 or 4 guys coming at you, and they all have different weapons and different types of armor, and you have to, decide how you're going to go about it. And so all of it, I mean, it's more fun in practice than it actually sounds, which is different than a lot of VR. I mean, there are a few VR games I feel like that have mechanics that are that enjoyable just in and of themselves, to where you don't really have to have a lot of trappings around the game in order for it to be fun. This is one of those games. Like, just the mechanics that they have built into this game and the systems that they're using, as simple as they are, just feel right and are a lot of fun. And the reviews, this game just came out. It's a new game. But
so just quickly on that point, though, I feel like I've heard this title around for a while. Was it in early access before?
Maybe I have the date wrong.
No.
Sure.
So the official release date for it, I looked up. It said July 10th. So it's out now. But I feel like the name just rings a bell. So I feel like it might have been in early access before, and maybe only now it's
but it seems like it's
either way.
Now.
It's relatively new, and obviously they finalized exactly what they want to do with it.
Yeah, and I mean, and tons of people. I mean, it has tons of positive reviews. People are really into it. Like I said, I'm kind of, on one hand, I'm kind of surprised by that, just because I feel like not a lot of titles don't get the same type of slack when they don't have a ton of content. I mean, there is content here. There's a lot of weapons to unlock and that sort of thing. But as far as the game modes and that kind of stuff, it is still pretty simplistic. So it would be nice if there was more to it than that. But still, I mean, I think if you're at all, I do think it plays better than, like, when you play it, even though it's simple, you get why people like it as much as they do, because it is a really fun game. It's just really simple, and so it depends on what you like to spend your money on, and if you're okay with spending $20 on something that's fairly simple but a lot of fun. And that
is this something that's like easy to like just drop people into that are either new or relatively inexperienced with VR? It sounds like that's what the title's going for.
It definitely is, and I want to say I did not try this mode myself, but when I was looking around just to see everything that was included with the game, I did see that there was a demo mode. And my understanding from that would be that a demo mode would be you stick this mode on to let people try it out. That's
Gotcha. Okay.
so I didn't try that. I should have probably, because I did see it and I said, oh, I should probably try that out before I talk about the game during game talk. But I just didn't. For some reason, I went back to Arena and played that for a long time. Didn't get back to the demo mode. But if that's what it is, like those types of modes when they're in games are super helpful because you know that you can just set it to that and kind of leave people to their own devices and you know that it'll be a smooth experience. So yeah, but yeah, I do recommend the game. It's one of those things. I don't know how I feel about the price because on one hand, I do think it's a little expensive because you're going to be doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, that same thing is done really, really well. And I guess one last thing that I kind of want to mention that I wasn't able to bring in earlier was just it has kind of a weird movement system. So it's not teleportation. It's not locomotion like in the traditional sense. It almost feels a little bit like what was it? The new Survios game that's coming out.
Sprint Vector.
Sprint Factor, yeah, and Sprint Vector, and that basically you're holding down. In this case, you're pushing the circle pad, and then you're basically pulling yourself. So you but that's the one aspect of the game that I was starting to get a little bit better with it as I played more and more. Like I started using it to kind of dodge attacks a little bit, and it felt great for that. But as far as moving from like one side of the arena to the other by just like pushing and pulling, it's not quite as forgiving or as responsive as I would like it to be. But
gotcha.
Like it felt a little imprecise. But that said, when it was in close combat situations, which is I'm sure what it's mostly intended for, then it felt good in those aspects because you can
at that point you just use room scale and walk around, right?
Yeah, but sometimes like it's a little bit faster to be able to kind of combine both. Oh, and that's 100%. I needed to bring that up. That the room scale stuff, especially. I mean, I have a fairly decent sized setup here, but the game is fast and frenetic, and like I said, you start getting into it, and you really do feel like the more power you put into your hits can actually impact how quickly you're able to take out some of the enemies. I actually like hit a chair in my room pretty hard when I knocked it. Like I think it's a game that you should be careful about in room scale because if you move around too much, you might end up doing some damage to something. Because 100%, like I really was getting into it. I mean, it was so. Like I said, that's a pro and a con because if you're too into it, you just have to be cognizant of. I'm one of those people that kind of puts the chaperone system on a low setting so it's not as noticeable. But in a game like this, I feel like that can sometimes lead to some dangerous circumstances. So
fair enough.
Yeah, but yeah, like so. Well, if you can't tell, I had a lot of fun playing it.
Yeah, it sounds really, like it offers like a unique experience that maybe we haven't come across yet in any other title, or at least for you.
And it's the little things that make it unique. Like there are other melee combat games that I've played. There's tons of wave-based shooters, wave-based, fighters, like all that kind of stuff. I've played boxing games. Knockout League is. There's all these kinds of different games that have similarities, but it's that gore factor, the satisfaction that you have and how the physics kind of work in the game and all that stuff kind of put together that make this more enjoyable than the sum of its parts.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I will have to check that one out then. Like I said, I've heard the name before, so maybe I could be wrong and I don't want to catch myself on recording here saying the wrong thing, but whatever the case might be, I have heard it, and it didn't seem like even then, it was highly reviewed or at least very well received. So glad to hear you tried it out and had a good experience. I'll have to take a look and maybe throw some people into it, especially those Game of Thrones fans.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Cool. Okay, so my game is actually a title that hasn't even come out yet. It's scheduled to release July 27th, so next week. And it's called Just in Time Incorporated. We're able to get a chance to play it with the help of through the developer, and who we're actually hoping to have on the show. So hopefully we'll set that up soon. But this game, similar to Gorn, I guess, it's super cartoony, like almost to the point where it's like, I mean, the graphics look like they could be from a very old console game. Like that's how corny it looks. But overall, the game has a fantastic feel and it's well done. You know, there's simple voiceover work, but at the end of the day, like that's more than a lot of other games have. And I think what really makes this game stand out is just how unique the concept is. And I know we were throwing that term around earlier, but I really feel like this game is different than a lot of the others that I've played or that I've come across. And so the basic premise is that you're an insurance agent, and so you're just helping out the policyholders, and you essentially have superpowers like the Flash. So you wear these gloves, which are your hands in VR, but time slows down and you can pretty much do whatever you want. I think another thing that I noticed that I really liked was the fact that you can interact with basically everything in the environment, which is nice.
That's actually a really big...
Yeah.
When you say that makes me really excited because that adds so much to any game.
It's like the little things.
Even if it doesn't really... Yeah, even if it doesn't really... If it isn't necessary, just knowing that you're able to interact with everything makes it feel so much better.
No, so that's definitely one of the pluses for the game. And so you're this insurance agent. You know, people buy life insurance or whatever, protection from you. And so therefore you go on all these like cases where people, the policyholders are in trouble or they're in danger. Someone's trying to shoot them or stab them or they're in some type of trouble. And you go in the specific scenario and you go in and you save them. And so, the scenarios that I went through, and I went through a decent amount, but there's still a lot more to unlock. Like, they're not overly complicated, but they have, again, I'll throw that word out there. They have like unique solutions. Like, you kind of have to think a little critically just to figure out what, because you have a bunch of tools that you can use in your environment. Like I was saying earlier, everything is available to you. And so you can kind of use all of those to figure out what you need in order to solve the problem. So it's almost like a puzzle solving type of scenario, but it does so in a way where you're timed very quickly because time is moving. You need to stop, the policyholder from getting killed or injured or whatever. And so everything
That's
like this.
so funny that it's all around.
Yeah. No. So the scenario is like moving around you at a snail's pace, enough so that like you can't just stand there and watch and not do anything and then move later. But things are happening and you have to like run around the room. It uses teleportation, so I just want to throw that out there for anybody who's either pro or anti teleportation. But it uses that for you to get around these pretty large environments. Obviously, there's room scale, so you can walk around as well. But these places that you're in, sometimes you're in like the middle of a street. Sometimes you're in some small alleyway. Sometimes you're right next to a burning building, having to like catch people as they fall down. So it's like I said, all the scenarios are really creative. Like I guess that's the word I was missing earlier. Like it's really creative. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can solve these problems, or I don't know if there's a lot of different ways, but there's a lot of different problems to solve and therefore a lot of different ways to solve those problems. So, no mission feels necessarily the same. And like, there's so much, I don't want to give like too much away, but you can like, again, and I guess it's funny that we're kind of talking about this in the same episode with Gorn, where, you can interact with the environment so much. So I'll give away like one spoiler because I thought it was hilariously creative, but there's this girl who's trapped inside this machine, and there's a laser that's like coming down to she's inside this machine, and there's this laser that's slowly like going to kill her, and protecting the machine, defending it from you saving her are these four like guys in like military gear, and they're shooting at you. Oh, and that's another cool thing. You can catch bullets out of the air and actually throw them back at the people, which is kind of awesome. But so there's these four guys. So you have to like take out the four guys and then go rescue her. And I actually failed this mission a couple times because, again, I wasn't beating it in the time necessary. You have to, the time is actually still a factor. So, well, you have to like take out these four guys. They're shooting at you, and then like one of the guys or two of the guys also have swords, which are like, that's not really that big of an issue. It's not like you can't grab it until you kill them. But it's just like, then you have to go to the door and to save the girl and stop the laser from, slicing her up. And what you'll see is that it requires eye tracking. And so you're like, so if you look into the thing, it just like gives you this like buzzing sound to show that, you're not the right person. And then that's when it clicked. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go use the sword. So I take the sword and I actually can chop off one of the dude's heads, pick up the head and bring it to the door to hold in front of the eye scanner.
That's awesome.
It's just like little, and again, like this is super cartoony. There's no gore or anything, but it's like these little like creative things that had me just kind of like,
feel like,
I was like giggling to myself throughout the game, because I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never done this before, or I've never seen something like this before, and it's like pleasantly surprising, which unfortunately, sometimes with VR games, there's a lot of people who have a great idea. It's just the same great idea that everybody else has. So it was really refreshing to try this game out. And I won't give away anything else. I hope that kind of covered the basic mechanics of it and what it's about, but it's really fun. It's really light. It's bright. It's not scary. It's not gory.
I'm really excited to play this.
Yeah. So it's, like I said, it's just a good time. Like you get in there and it's just these like little puzzle solving scenarios. Nothing's ever super like life or death. You're never like fighting anyone.
When did you say it's coming out? Because I know we got a chance to play it early. But...
July 27th. So
okay,
it'll be out soon. So yeah, later on this month. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if you had any of the questions or if there's anything else that you wanted to know about it, but that's like the basic gist.
I think you.
Aside from that, I don't want to give too much away because there's a lot to explore in the game, and so we're trying to coordinate an interview with Ryan, the developer, right now. So hopefully we can get him on the show, because I personally would love to hear just how some of these scenarios came about.
Well, and even without playing it, I mean, for people out there that are interested in the title, there's a trailer out that I think that I had watched that was hilarious. Like it showed kind of what the game was all about, and a lot of that charm that you're talking about, seep through even that trailer. So for people that are interested, go check out the trailer. And
absolutely,
and taking into account what you just said, Zain, I'm really excited about it. So
yeah, you'll have to give it a try, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too. So, but yeah, man, with that, that's all I got. How about you?
Yeah, no, that's it. It was a good week for VR.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people aren't too bummed out by all the Oculus news, but I'm still holding out. It's early in the game, and after talking with Dan and seeing all the stuff that HTC is up to, obviously they're excited about the what's happening. So I'm excited about it too. We'll just have to wait and see, content, hardware, whatever it ends up being. It's the long game, and I'm just glad to see more and more titles like this coming out.
I agree.
Cool, Matt. So with that, we will cut this episode now. And just a quick reminder, we are on iTunes and Stitcher. We are giving away that free Steam gift card at the beginning of every month. So make sure you enter. The instructions will be in the show notes, but just a quick refresher. All you got to do is leave a review, take a screenshot of it, send that to contact@everythingvive.com. And like I said, for Stitcher as well, we are accepting those now. And so, yeah, enter that in. We'll get you a Steam $20 Steam gift card we give away at the beginning of every month. And that's all I got. Ronnie, you have a fantastic rest of the week and weekend, man.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, guys. We'll catch you all again very, very soon.